Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of Kerfefe Break. This is a live show, usually that I do Mondays and Fridays, talk about what's in the news, talk about what's on our mind. And we've been doing them every day this week, except yesterday, so we can cover the WPATH files and not have it drag out for weeks. I think it's a really important topic. As you know, this is the fourth episode in our WPATH series, and I'm just glad you're here. If you're new, we have a series called Pop Culture, which we do every other Wednesday with one of my best friends, Mystery Chris, and that's kind of a fun. That's a nighttime show. We look at different pop culture topics, and that's a load of fun. And then every other Wednesday, when we're not doing pop culture, we've been doing a new show called That Christian Panel. If that interests you, we had one last night with special guest Drunk 3PO, and it was myself, Brahma Bull, Michelle from Force of Light, and we reviewed the movie Ordinary Angels, which is currently in theaters, and we all loved it. I'm just going to tell you, we all liked it. There weren't very many dissenting voices. We had different things to say about it, but we all enjoyed it. So if you're looking for a date night movie or something to enjoy on your own, even like a fun solo movie trip, go to the theaters and see this movie because it's very inspirational. You don't have to be a believer, a Christian, to get something from it, I think. And we also have interviews. I've got some interviews in the can. I'm going to start putting those out next week. I just thought it would be too much to have them out this week with all the streaming I'm doing about WPATH files. Um, Hello, I see some regulars in the chat. I should also say, if you like the channel and you want to help support it, you can subscribe here at YouTube if you become a channel member for as little as $1 a month, or you can support us on Patreon. Subscribe you can do a one-time contribution if you don't want to do a monthly thing. You can also do that on Locals, and I appreciate all the people who help us make this show and put it together. And yeah, I appreciate you guys. Okay. What else? Yesterday, part of the reason also I didn't do a WPATH Files yesterday was because we had the Christian panel, but also I was on Lauren Chen's channel yesterday. She has a show called Pseudo Intellectual. It's a funny name, and that I think mostly I got to talk about what we've been talking about this week, trying to summarize what we've been reading about in the WPATH Files. And if you're like, what's the WPATH files? And you stumbled here and you don't know what we're talking about. It's the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. There was a report put out last week by two journalists, Michael Shellenberger and Mia Hughes. We've been making our way through the report. We also talked about yesterday on Lauren Chen's channel, the UK, the NHS is now banning puberty blockers for children, so people under the age of 18. And we were talking about both of these things. And, sometimes I do interviews or shows where I felt like, oh, my brain wasn't working at full capacity. I could have done a better job. But yesterday I felt like I was doing a great job summarizing. I really wanted to say, if people see this, because she has a lot of people who watch her channel and they haven't watched the files or they haven't read the files, the WPATH files, what are the bullet points? And I just want to make sure I get through those are the most important things people should know about it. So I think I did a good job. Go and check it out. Maybe it's concise enough. You can send it to some of your friends. If these videos are too long and rambling, that's a good one to send them on her channel. Okay. Hello, folks. Oh, thanks, Frying Pants. You were great on Chan's show. Thank you. I had a moment where just everything was clicking. You know what? My husband prayed over me beforehand just to speak what I was supposed to say. And I joked with him after all, because we were watching Biden's speech. You guys recently, I don't know if you watched the State of the Union, but everybody was speculating that Biden was on something, maybe Adderall. I don't know. They had to pump him full of something, and it seemed to be wearing off towards the end. So I made a joke that I was on Gotterall yesterday. I know it's a cheesy joke. Those are the kind of jokes that happen in this house. Anyway, I said, hey, I was on Gotterall. Okay, folks, we're getting back into a heavy subject. We're getting back into the WPATH files. Before we do, let's have a bit more frivolity, just because this is going to be another. This is dark stuff we're talking about. So what was the funny thing I was going to say? Oh, Being on Lauren Chen's channel yesterday, I saw some of the comments scrolling by in her chat, and it's always funny to me when I'm on another channel or something. I actually do forget sometimes that there are adults who have problems with hats and with certain kinds of fashion. And then when I'm on another channel, maybe they don't know me or whatever. And then I see it and I'm like, oh, yeah, that happens. And there were some funny, I know this is just a frivolous topic, but I felt like I should say this again in case there's an adult watching who wants to wear something that makes them happy, but they don't because they feel like, oh, I can't pull that off, or people will make fun of me. As an adult, you're still thinking those things. And I know as some adults do, because I used to sell handmade cowboy boots and I would have people come in to the shop sometimes and they would try on boots. They would fall in love with these boots. They would say, this is my pair. I love it. And then at the end, they would say, I just don't know if I don't know if I can pull this off. And it always hurt my heart for them because it's like, if you love it, you can wear it. Who cares? People say that to me out and about sometimes about hats. They'll say, I love your hat. Women, I love your hat, but I don't know if I could pull that off. I'm like, yes, you can. So if you're an adult who needs to hear that today, who cares what other people think? It doesn't matter. It's fashion. That not everybody's going to agree. And I happen to like hats. I do wear them a lot. I don't wear them all the time. I do wear them a lot. And you know, I was just at a black church recently, and I'll tell you there, I'm definitely not the only lady wearing a hat. And and also in wine country, in the hill country in Texas, everybody wears them. I'd say around this part of Texas where I'm at near Georgetown, maybe 25% of people wear them, unless you count baseball caps, and then maybe 50% of people wear them. But if you go to hill country, everybody's wearing them, and I just love them. I love all kinds. I love Western hats. It doesn't matter. Anyway, that's a little bit of frivolity for you. Mrs. A says, that was for me. I was the one who needed to hear that. Thanks, Keri. Good. Because I know I've met adults who still, you get into those patterns from childhood where you care too much about what other people think, but we're adults now. You can wear what you want. And the more you wear it, the more, Miss A, the more you wear whatever that thing is that gives you joy. It's like the more comfortable you get in it anyway. And then it really doesn't matter what people have to say. A lot of times the naysayers, like there were some people in that chat, there was one guy, he could not pay attention. All of his comments were like about the hat for like 30 minutes. He's like, I can't pay attention. The hat's too distracting. And I was thinking, and he had squirrel in his name. And I was thinking, maybe that's why squirrel's in his name, because he's got such a short attention span. The hat's really bothering him. Well, that's on you, dude. Or maybe it's because you have some kind of internal jealousy where you're like, I wish I could wear something that I love, but I don't have that confidence or whatever. Well, do it. Do it. And then you won't feel a need to say that. Speaking of taking off my boots, I always wear this even more than hats. I mean, people know me as a hat person because of YouTube, but you can't see my feet. I'm more of a boot person actually. And like I said, I used to sell these, and you can get all kinds of beautiful artwork on a nice pair of cowboy boots. And if you let yourself, if you say, oh, I don't know if I can do that, I don't know if I can pull that off, you're just you're giving in to some imaginary childhood bully in your head. So don't do it. Okay, that's it. That's the light. No, that's the light topic before we get into something dark. Cheeky Mayor, no feet pics, Keri. No, that's not happening ever. Okay. So we're doing WPATH Files again today because it's so dense. There's 130 pages, and I've been trying to condense it into different specific topics. So today I wanted to talk about, in the last episode, we talked about consent, how the doctors in the WPATH Files are on video and in the written word admitting that they know that the children who are giving so-called informed consent for these so-called gender affirming surgeries and treatments, that they are not capable of giving consent. The doctors know this, and we covered that in the last episode. Please go and watch it if you are interested in what's in the files with regards to consent. In this episode, I wanted to talk about how the files reveal that this is medical experimentation. That this is not backed up. It's not evidence-based medicine. It's not backed up by research. That's why the NHS has stopped it in the UK. Yes, even puberty blockers. No puberty blockers for kids, because there's no evidence to show that these don't create a lot of harm for children. And the Hippocratic Oath is first do no harm. As we saw in this series previously, we talked about how the president of WPATH, Marcy Bowers, is on video and in the written record admitting that the puberty blockers, for example, in 100% of cases, when they give them to little boys who are in Tanner stage 2, which is around the age of 11 years old, that in 100% of cases, those little boys go on into adulthood to never experience orgasm. So they know, she's admitting, or he, Marcy Bowers is actually a biological man, but they are admitting that this is chemically castrating young children. They're on the record admitting that. And so in that same video, one of the things we saw, and this is the subject for today, is that after Marcy Bowers talked about how none of these little boys are able to perform sexually in adulthood, then Dr. Bowers started talking about things they could try. Maybe we try to give the hormones sooner. Maybe we stop giving them for a while. Maybe we experiment and do this. And just blatantly, openly on camera, basically giving us a window into how they're administering this. And it's complete spitballing. It's complete, like, let's just see what works on these children who are guinea pigs. So that's part of the reason that the UK has said, no, we're banning this for kids. We're going to do clinical trials because there is no evidence to support this. And today we're going to talk about the medical experimentation part of it. So I've got 2 things pulled up. I've got a summary, some excerpts that are found in the files. If you want to go and read, there's a link to the WPATH files below. If you want to go and read this, they have a section with excerpts, so it summarizes some of the information. And then I've got the main files pulled up again so we can look at that. Let me put this one on the screen first. Okay, so this is from their excerpt section. Now, if you're sending this to someone on the left and they maybe don't want to read it, we've talked about that too, people having these tribal biases where they don't want to read anything that's going to contradict their ideology or these received opinions that they have. At the very least, they especially because it's 130 pages, they'll probably use that length as an excuse. At the very least, ask them to read the excerpts, which is just a few pages. So this is from, it's 8 pages. This is from the excerpts. Extreme body modifications with no medical justification. So these are some quotes of screenshots, and the screenshots are all included in the files. You can read them yourself, but they've summarized it here. These are the things that were said in the screenshots. This is from Dr. Thomas Satterwhite. Now, you guys might recognize his name. In our very first episode here, we talked about a young man named Yarden who unfortunately died at the age of 23 from complications related to his surgery. His colon was spilling out of his so-called neo-vagina, the gaping wound that they create after they cut off the penis and testicles. And he called out, he left several reviews online before his death calling out Dr. Thomas Satterwhite, who is one of his surgeons. He also called out the surgeons in New York who would do nothing for him, when he decided he wanted to detransition, and he passed away, unfortunately, and he's not the only one. But that's this doctor. This is Yarden's doctor. So here's something from the files. He says, quote, "I've performed mastectomies without nipples or have created chests with varying degrees of remaining breast tissue, or created incision patterns specific to my patient's wishes. For bottom surgery, I've performed minimal depth vaginoplasties, vulvoplasties. I've also done phallus preserving vaginoplasties and nullification procedures. I'm quite comfortable tailoring my operations to serve the needs of each patient. So what does this mean? Look how they've highlighted nullification procedures. This means he is creating, and we've seen pictures of this. I'm not going to put them up during this episode because they're disturbing, but they are creating bodies that do not exist in nature, especially for some of their patients who claim to be non-binary. They're doing, as he said, they're doing a mastectomy, double mastectomy on these children, taking off their breasts, and then in some cases not putting the nipples back, not trying to make it look like a male chest, trying to make it look like something unnatural that doesn't actually exist. So they have this like Frankenstein chest with no nipples. What he means down here is he's done surgeries where he's done phallus preserving vaginoplasties. That's where he's creating a person who has their penis still intact and a new fake neovagina, like creating an open wound next to the penis. Nullification procedures, that's where he's taking off the penis and the testicles, and then he's not creating a neovagina, so-called vagina. They're just sewing it up. So it's like a Ken doll, basically. They're making your genital area like into a Ken doll. And he says he's quite comfortable doing this, experimenting in this way. I'm quite comfortable. These are monsters. These are Frankenstein monsters. This is the same surgeon, Dr. Thomas Satterwhite. Quote, how do we come up with appropriate standards for non-binary patients? What best practices and standards are you following in your experience? I've found more and more patients recently requesting non-standard procedures, such as top surgery without nipples, nullification, and phallus-preserving vaginoplasty. Yeah. Here's another person from the files. This person is not a doctor. This is an activist law professor. Quote, gender clinicians should provide care for trans people whose embodiment goals do not fit dominant expectations. That means their goals are something unnatural. This is almost as bad as what we talked about in the files, the people who are wanting to have their arms cut off, like the people who identify as transabled. This is actually probably worse than that because it's creating something that doesn't even exist in nature, whose embodiment goals do not fit dominant expectations. That's the Orwellian way they're talking about that. Such as those who want mastectomies without nipples, mastectomies for people who do not want breasts from estrogen, and vagina preserving phalloplasties. That's the opposite of the one above. This is where the person is a biological girl and they keep her vagina intact, and then they create a fake penis usually from her skin that they cut off to create this skin tube that looks nothing like a penis. It's like a fleshy stump that they sew on to the body. Here's another one from a doctor. Quote, I think we're going to see a wave of non-binary affirming requests for surgery that will include non-standard procedures. I have worked with clients who identify as non-binary, agender, so no gender, and eunuchs. Remember we covered this? They're talking about eunuchs in these files, who have wanted atypical surgical procedures, many of which either don't exist in nature, or represent the first of their kind, and therefore probably have few examples of best practices. Yeah, there are few examples of best practices because you guys are doing Mengele level experimentation, medical experimentation on humans, including human children. And you're selling this as scientific It's not. None of this is evidence-based medicine. Okay, I'm going to switch over to the bulk of the files. We're going back into this large document. Dark water. So non-binary can have no genitals or an attempt at both. Yes, that's what these doctors are admitting to doing. And we've seen pictures of some of these. Okay. Doctors improvising. This is from a section of the WPATH files starting on page 25. This is doctors improvising and experimenting. Now, before this, I'm skipping over for the sake of time. There's 2 whole sections on how this is not scientific and this is not medical. It's not medically sound. So those sections are up here. WPATH has abandoned the Hippocratic Oath. I'm skipping down though for the sake of time to doctors improvising and experimenting. As already shown, WPATH advocates for an unregulated experiment to be conducted on minors who are experiencing gender-related distress. There is no reliable evidence to support the safety and efficacy of puberty suppression for trans-identified adolescents. I'm going to read that again. There is no reliable evidence to support the safety and efficacy of puberty suppression for trans-identified adolescents. However, there is further evidence in the files that WPATH members are engaged in improvisation and experimentation rather than rigorous science. For example, in the discussion threads concerning the debilitating reproductive organ pain experienced by both male and female patients due to hormone therapy, the advice is consistently anecdotal and little more than guesswork. In the thread about the young natal female who had required emergency room care for pelvic inflammatory disease, PID, after 3 years on testosterone, the New York nurse told the group that the estrogen cream, quote, appears to have stopped working, end quote, and that the patient has persistent yellow discharge. Quote, has anyone had luck with estrase tablets versus cream? The nurse asked, seemingly in lieu of consulting scientific literature. Yeah, because there's no literature on this. The replies contain vague anecdotal recommendations that topical creams can help a few patients, and a couple of trans-identified natal females tell of remedies that helped relieve some of their symptoms. A Michigan family physician tells the forum of the success she had treating 2 natal females with an antispasmodic drug to relieve their painful orgasms, specifying that the drug should be taken 30 to 60 minutes before orgasm. However, anecdotes are not science, and no one in the forum provided links to actual scientific literature providing evidence-based recommendations for managing these painful iatrogenic symptoms. The reason for this is there is no reliable science to consult. A 2021 review of the relevant literature states that the field of transgender medicine is relatively new and little is known of the effects of testosterone therapy, end quote. But did note that natal females on testosterone therapy frequently experience symptoms of vaginal atrophy, similar to those of the postmenopausal state, including dryness, irritation, bleeding with vaginal penetration, like with sex or medical examination, and pain during intercourse. The authors acknowledge that these symptoms have had, quote, a substantial impact on the quality of life, end quote, and may require local estrogen-based therapy. But, quote, the efficacy of this approach has not been documented, end quote. These are things that doctors are acknowledging, again, to each other. They don't know the efficacy of doing this. Worse, a 2023 study found that testosterone use increases a female's libido while at the same time increasing pain during intercourse, with over 60% of participants reporting genital pain or discomfort during sexual activity. The researchers noted that the majority of trans-identified females or natal females, so born female, experience vulvovaginal pain during sexual activity, and concluded that, quote, given this high burden, there is an urgent need to identify effective and acceptable interventions for this population, end quote. In the thread discussing an endocrinologist question about why some trans-identified natal males experience, quote, significant pain with erections post-hormone therapy, end quote, and whether this pain was likely to persist after undergoing vaginoplasty, the responses were once again vague and anecdotal, with WPATH members speculating that the discomfort could be linked to factors such as tissue atrophy and thinning of penile skin and infrequent erections. Some members even admitted to never addressing this concern with their patients. A trans-identified natal male counselor shared a personal anecdote about experiencing this symptom and indicated that it was resolved through penis amputation. It's so crazy. This is all so crazy, isn't it? Reading all of this, sometimes you just have to take a step back and just like, this is insane. This is the mental patients running the asylum. That's who these doctors are in WPATH. We know the crazy origins of this organization already, but that's who these people are. Some of them are not even doctors, they're like activists in there. And this is who has been guiding this new kind of quote unquote medicine and surgery for children. It's just a bunch of Bengalis. It's just a bunch of Frankensteins in here. Just sharing anecdotes and ideology, but like no scientific evidence or this is incredible. Quote, my guess, and it's just a guess, I'm not a medical person. Of course you're not. Would be that the pain, I just my guess, and it's just a guess, I'm not a medical person. I'm just in the WPATH Files guiding policy for gender medicine and surgery for children, where we mutilate them, take off their reproductive organs, and sterilize them for life. That's just me. I'm not a medical person. I just guide policy on. Oh my goodness. Okay. Let me get through this. I'm not a medical person. My guess would be that the pain is related to erectile tissue in the penis, and the removal of that tissue during vaginoplasty addresses the problem, said the counselor. In another thread, a nurse practitioner told the group about a female patient who identified as non binary and was requesting, quote, masculinizing hormone therapy. The patient had asked about taking finasteride, a 5A reductase inhibitor used to treat prostatic hyperplasia, BPH, and male pattern hair loss to prevent, quote, bottom growth. Bottom growth is a term used to describe the permanent enlargement of the clitoris due to testosterone use. This can cause significant pain and sensitivity. The replies are once again in a chorus of speculation, with no one providing any scientific literature to back up the experimental use of this drug for this purpose. One doctor from Massachusetts said that she would, quote, be interested to hear if others have tried using it to block clitoral growth. They're talking about a drug that's used to treat male pattern hair loss. Like, why not give it to this young girl? You're already giving her testosterone, which is causing the clitoris to grow to a natural painful length. And why not just give her this male pattern hair loss drug and just see, maybe that'll help. This is all experimentation on these kids. It's just incredible. So this doctor says, I'd be interested in hearing if others have tried it to block clitoral growth. And a family physician from Manchester who had also had a patient request the drug had not been able to find any evidence to support using it for this reason. Quote, any resources, evidence, or advice would be appreciated, he concluded. In fact, finasteride is mentioned in the Standards of Care 8 as a possible treatment option for undesired male pattern hair loss in female patients who are on testosterone. But the authors cautioned that it, quote, may impair clitoral growth and the development of facial and body hair, end quote. There were plenty of examples of improvisation in our leaked panel discussion as well. where Dr. Cecil Ferrando, a surgeon, tells the assembled WPATH members that she experiments with, quote, underdosing natal females with testosterone. She explains that these females desire, quote, a cessation of menses, end quote. So they don't want to have their period, but not virilization. Ferrando added that these young women in their 20s, quote, err on the masculine side of the spectrum, but don't want to be fully masculinized, end quote. The gender surgeon tells the group that her experimental use of a Schedule 3 controlled substance improves the young women's, quote, state of being and sense of well-being, end quote. It's not just adults who are being experimented on either. Massey shares an account of a confused young patient being treated by equally confused healthcare providers. The child has been on puberty blockers for about 2 years, and her pediatric endocrinologist wants her to stay on a little longer. Quote, the kid is vacillating, really not wanting facial hair, end quote, but unsure about having menstrual cycles, quote, and kind of vacillates about whether breast development, chest development bothers them or not, and which pronouns they want to use, end quote, explains Massey. So sounds like a confused kid who you've now put on puberty blockers, which has permanent lasting effects, and you're ushering them onto the next stage of this, which ultimately goes to surgery, as we've seen. Quote, so is there more benefit of them staying on blockers or letting the kids switch back to their indigenous estrogen? Or is it better to go low dose testosterone or what? And at what point in time? Quote, this is a quote from this therapist. Dude, they have no idea. They're spitballing. Ask the confused therapist. Quote, so if the kid doesn't want facial hair, but maybe doesn't mind their chest growing and they're planning on having chest surgery anyways, cutting the breasts off anyways, so we may want to be creative in how we help folks approach these situations that are complex, Massey concludes. It is safe to say that most parents do not want confused doctors being, quote, creative, end quote, when it comes to performing life-altering medical interventions on their children. Metzger describes putting 13-year-olds on cross-sex hormones as, quote, like a journey, end quote, like a journey, with the child's doctor, quote, coming along for the ride, end quote. He explains that he lets his teenage patients lead. He explains that he lets his teenage patients lead when it comes to their hormone doses, asking them each time they show up for an appointment, what do they want to do with their hormones? They're choosing their dosage, kids, because this is all an experiment. He noted that, quote, kids do shift with time, particularly the non-binary kids, end quote, who often end up not wanting to be as masculine as they first thought. Quote, they find out there's a happy dose that's gotten rid of their periods or whatever, and they're happy on that dose, end quote. While it might seem odd to put a child in the driving seat in this way, it is entirely consistent with WPATH's affirmative model of care, which strives to help patients achieve their unique and often shifting, quote, embodiment goals, end quote. This language, embodiment goals, this is being used to justify medical experimentation on children. It's being used to justify Frankenstein-like stuff where these doctors are just experimenting and creating body types that are not found in nature. It's being used to justify experiments on kids that they know and they admit are causing tumors, are causing cancer in the liver, are causing death in some cases, are causing sterility, pain, lack of normal sex life, inability to orgasm, just a whole host of these problems. Embodiment goals. It's also what leads them to, in these files, go back and forth about how they can help a person who identifies as transabled, to cut off some of their body parts so they are missing limbs so they feel more like their embodiment goals. So I think they said so that their mind aligns with their body. This is just absolute quackery. However, despite clear evidence that gender affirming healthcare providers are experimenting on the patients in their care, WPATH's official stance is that these treatments are evidence based. Wow. Interestingly, WPATH deliberately refrains from using the term experimental in its SOC 8, all the while acknowledging the absence of evidence to support its recommendations. For example, in the adolescent chapter, when addressing all the uncertainties surrounding whether a non gender identity is fixed from birth or part of a quote developmental process, end quote, the authors concede that quote future research, if conducted over long periods of time with diverse cohort groups, end quote, future research, would shed more light on gender identity development if conducted over long periods of time with diverse cohort groups. In other words, there is no science to support the idea that gender identity is fixed or to justify permanently altering a young person's body using drugs and surgeries. Therefore, the whole treatment protocol is experimental, except for the fact that it doesn't even meet that low bar because a real experiment involves control groups and diligent follow up, neither of which occurs in WPATH's field of gender affirming medicine. It's experimentation without the safeguards for an actual experiment. Isn't that crazy? It's like a rung lower than medical experimentation because they're just going gung ho into it. There's no control group. There's no follow up to see how these kids are doing into adulthood. They're not writing up the results. They're not doing a study. Of note, every European systematic review of the evidence for adolescent sex trait modification interventions to date has concluded that the treatments are experimental. Yes, because they are. What's more, WPATH is aware that this experiment is not just confined to minors. In the adult chapter of SOC 8, the authors state that the quote criteria in this chapter have been significantly revised from SOC 7 to reduce requirements and unnecessary barriers to care. It is hoped that future research will explore the effectiveness of this model. Did you see what they're saying there? And we hope in the future research will see if this was effective to get rid of all barriers to care, to get rid of all barriers to this unregulated medical experimentation. Maybe people will research that in the future, if that was good or not. If the aforementioned section discussing the possible use of finasteride to prevent unwanted side effects of testosterone use in females, the authors conclude that, quote, studies are needed to assess the efficacy and safety of 5A reductase inhibitors in transgender populations, end quote. Similar phrasing synonymous with experimental can be found all throughout the SOC 8. The deliberate avoidance of the term experimental is due to the fact that experimental medicine is not covered by health insurance. And one of the primary objectives of WPATH SOC 8 is to secure insurance coverage, and AIM, the leading transgender health group, prioritizes over adhering to the best medical practices. Yeah. How are you guys doing listening to all this? I know it's heavy stuff. I'm just going to check in on the chat for a second because I need a break from reading all this. Dion with the quotes, accursed creator, why did you form a monster so hideous that even you turned from me in disgust? Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. Davina, it's gross and horrifying. John, surviving. Yeah, it is gross and horrifying. G-Man, sounds good to me. I would like to bring back public deletion. Yeah, these people are insane, KB. This is, you know, stop sharing this for a second. I don't think it's hyperbolic. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this is an expression of psychopathy and sociopathy in public view, that this is a function of that, that we've given. It's not just, you give the mental patients are running the asylum. It's actually the psychopaths are running the medical field right now. They're running gender medicine right now. This is psychopathic. There's no empathy. There's no empathy for any of the kids and the adults who these doctors are aware are are being harmed through this practice. They say things, like that 14-year-old girl that we were looking at in either episode 1 or 2, where they said after a year on testosterone, she had started developing tumors in her liver. And then another doctor said, "Oh, yeah, that happened to someone I knew who also a biological female developed liver cancer and died, and it was from the hormones." They admit it's from the hormones, it's from the testosterone. They admit it, they know it, and then what do? No empathy whatsoever, because the very next thing that doctor says is, "We're gonna support her," or they call her him. "We're gonna support him getting top surgery." They just go straight into, "Well, we caused liver cancer. Most likely it was the hormones that caused this liver cancer in this 14-year-old. So when can we get her in to get her breast cut off?" I mean, that's basically how they're talking about it so casually. There's no sense of urgency or shame, or, we should report this to the public, or there's none of that. It's a lack of the normal human range of emotion and caring for other people. And I think I think I think it's like you said, Katie, it's madness. It's watching psychopathy just rule the entire medical field. It's crazy. There's no acknowledgement this might not be in the best interest of the children patients. Yeah. It's weird, right? Because they do, on the one hand, they acknowledge that it's causing all these problems. They acknowledge it and they admit it. But like you said, they hold the belief that, on the whole, this is great. This is helpful, and this is fighting oppression. They hold that belief so high that no matter the cost, even death, it doesn't shake that belief that what they're doing is a good thing, and to do otherwise would be transphobic. Cheeky mare, I'm never going to be able to trust doctors again. You and me both. I mean, between this scandal, the trans and kid scandal, and the COVID years, I'm in a place now where I think I used to put doctors on such a pedestal and just automatically trusted every suggestion they made. No longer. This silver lining of that is I'm now very skeptical. I mean, even routine, like, there's a doctor who just recommended a medicine for my husband, and we're sort of like, "Well, let us research everything first." Like, whatever it is, I'm like, "Let us look into it." I'm sorry. I don't have that trust for you anymore that I used to have. So, mm, that's probably a good thing. Gee, man, there ought to be a law that parents cannot be informed about this. I'm not sure what you mean there. I don't know if that's sarcasm, or I'm probably slow this morning because 'cause I've only had 1 cup of coffee. So, gee, man, if I don't understand you, I apologize. Mm, okay. I think we could get into, let me just see how long this section is, about surgery. I don't know, this is kind of a long one. If we get into the next one, I think I'll just save it. I know we've only done an hour, but these have gotten kinda long, and I don't wanna spend I don't wanna jump right into the next one and do, like, another hour, hour and a half on it. I'm gonna save it. Okay, look at this. Let's just play a game of, how about this? Let's play this game of just scrolling through the screenshots to see And we'll just randomly land on one and see how messed up it is, okay? On a scale of 1 to 10. Davina says, "Good, we get the point." Okay, good. We're gonna take a break there. I think we covered the whole, like, this is medical experimentation thing. I'm not gonna get into the surgery part today. These are from at the end of almost the whole second half of this or more. It's just the records, the actual facts. So you can go and look through the original sources yourselves, and these are screenshots from of internal communications between these WPATH members, doctors and activists, etc. So let's just look at one. We've seen this cropping up a lot lately on Twitter anyway. If you're on X, you've probably seen this where biological men are pumping themselves full of drugs to try and induce lactation so they can so-called breastfeed their babies that they've acquired one way or the other. It's so narcissistic. It's so they can feel like a woman, like a real woman, like they are willing to take drugs to pump themselves full of this. I saw Josie, the redheaded libertarian, had a great she was like, "I'm not allowed to eat soft cheese when I'm pregnant because it could harm the baby." And these guys are pumping themselves full of all kinds of different drugs to try and produce some sludge from their breasts that they are then putting in the mouths of babies. This is so narcissistic. This is experimentation on babies. There no baby should have to be a guinea pig so an adult man can, feel like a woman. So you can his narcissism can be coddled and assuaged. Like no baby should have to be the cost of that. The Anyway, here, look at this. I've never had this request, but I have had patients who have expressed a wish to lactate so they can nurse or co-nurse a child. I think there are a few studies of this being done successfully, but I would be interested to know more. Let's see what this doctor's replying to and how messed up it is. A WPATH member discusses risk in providing a trans patient with lactation capabilities via surgery. Okay. Lactation in a trans woman, so a man. I have a 30-year-old trans woman who wants to lactate, quote, just to experience it, end quote. This is not to nurse an infant. Tell me again. Let me pause here. Let me cut in to say, tell me again, this is not a sexual fetish. This is a sexual fetish. You're a man who wants to have surgery to look like a woman, breasts to look like a woman, and you wanna be able to lactate just to quote experience that this is part of some fetish. I refuse to believe that you're one of the people who has legitimate, like, gender dysphoria since you were a toddler. It felt like you were uncomfortable with your biological sex. I don't think that's true. I think you get off on I think you're one of the autogonophile. You get off on your seeing yourself as a woman, gives you a sexual thrill, and you're getting a thrill from this additional part of being able to quote unquote lactate. The, this is not to nurse an infant. Protocols to do this involve increased estrogen and giving progesterone as well as domperidone. Technically not even approved here in the USA. I have some ethical issues with this, as this is not without some risk. I'm interested in hearing comments. Wow, shocker. A doctor here has ethical issues. Here's another answer. I also have ethical concerns in this case. If a cis woman came to me with this wish, I would refuse therapy. After all, we are talking about a medical intervention that is not necessary. Look at the cognitive dissonance here. They're able to say, okay, a person who wants to go on all these drugs and all this medication to be able to lactate just to see just to experience it, that's not necessary. So therefore, we should not do it. But they don't see that taking skin off the arm and trying to create a skin tube on a child and like a fake penis and all of this is not necessary either. They pretend that that is necessary. But now there's a line here. I'm not sure about this. This guy says, I've also had success with this other kind of drug, pumping along with estradiol, not necessarily at an increased dose. Depending on levels, there's some risk for tardive dyskinesia, what's that, with this drug, but it's FDA approved and more easily accessible than the domperidone. Here's another person. I'm an ethicist, not a physician. Wow, they have they have ethicists in this chat? Really? I'm an ethicist, not a physician. I agree with you that there is a questionable reason for this medical intervention. You are not a technician. You are a professional to whom society gives certain privileges in exchange for your prudent use of resources, your commitment to interventions where benefits outweigh the risk, and to at least do no harm. Wow. I understand your patient's desire to experience lactation as one function of her womanhood, but that's an insufficient reason, in my estimation, to intervene medically. Our colleague put it well. If a cis woman requested this, they would refuse. So it seems like, though, if this man went and somehow acquired a baby, a victim, then they would do it. If he's got a baby to feed, they would do it. And that baby would be the guinea pig and being quote unquote breastfed by this man. It just, it's just crazy. This is that part we read before where it had been transcribed about gender nullification surgery, where they're doing things that are not even natural. Quote, "This is an uncommon but very important topic, in my opinion. I found it really important to discuss with patients exactly what they want, e.g., orgasms or not, sitting to urinate or not, etc. Getting the letters of psychological support are particularly important in this case. That said, what I have done in the past is total penectomy with neurovascular pedicle preservation and burial of the neoclitoris so patients can continue to have orgasms if they wish. A segment of the bulbar urethral remnant is preserved and brought out as a perennial. I can't read all this medical jargon, but basically, he's talking about this is how he does the non binary request to create something that's not found in nature. Nullification surgery. It's so funny how that you see doctors in here going, "I actually just came here to ask about this. I had an assigned female at birth client bring it up to me today, and I had never heard of it. I did find a couple of doctors via Google. I would like to have more basic info." Totally no evidence, nothing. These are doctors that are like spitballing together. I haven't been able to find anything. I just heard about this. The patient told me. What do I do? How do I do it? That's enough of that today. I'm done. I'm not gonna read any more of the WPATH files today. We will be back tomorrow at our regular time, 1 o'clock Central. I think we're gonna finish it. There's so much we haven't gotten through, but I'm gonna pick a final point about the files that I wanna get across. So far, we've talked about the dangers, the castration, sterilization, death in some cases, liver cancer. We've also covered the factor of consent, how the doctors are aware that that children cannot give consent. They're not able to give consent to these procedures or to understand what they're consenting to. We've covered the fact that it's medical experimentation. It's not evidence-based. And we're gonna wrap it up tomorrow with a conclusion, and talk about what's probably coming next. But this is hard stuff to read, but like I said at the very beginning of the series, I'm so glad this came out. I'm so grateful to these journalists, Michael Shellenberger, Mia Hughes, whoever was involved in leaking all this information. I think it's going to lead to the dam breaking. I think it's a huge break in the dam because once you look into this, it's hard to say, yeah, I continue to support this. The hard part is getting people who are already locked into their ideology, which gives them their opinions without any information. The hard part is getting them to open their mind enough to read the WPATH files or to hear information contained within. And that's going to be the hardest part. If you're talking to people about it, I would hammer home these points that we've highlighted so far. I would hammer home that, because they don't know these things. I would say, did you know the puberty blockers, it's not true that they're a pause button. It's not true that they don't have permanent effects. Did you know the president of WPATH admitted on camera and in writing that it, in 100% of cases, it causes the little boys around age 11 who they give it to it, by the time they reach adulthood, they're never able to sexually perform or to have an orgasm. Did you know that? That's in here. That dispels one of these big myths that they run around thinking there's, what's the harm? Puberty blockers don't have any permanent effects. Ew, let's just a pause button. No, that's not true. And these doctors know this and admit it on camera. Then go watch it. The other thing I would say, the other big point, like, yeah, children don't have the cognitive ability to consent to this. And when I'm having conversations in person, I always like to bring up examples that I think they will agree with, unless you get a crazy person who says children should be able to do anything adults are able to do. Okay, put that person over there. It's rare you're going to encounter that person. Most of the time, you're going to encounter someone, if you ask them, like, isn't it true, though, that society treats children differently than adults because we collectively realize that we acknowledge that kids are different than adults, they're not cognitively developed. And so isn't it true that society and our law, we protect kids from certain things that we don't protect adults from? We don't allow kids to have sex with adults. We don't allow them to drive a car or buy a gun or drink or smoke or get a tattoo. So why should we allow them? Why do you think they're cognitively developed enough to be able to decide if they want to cut their genitals off or be sterilized for life or have these medical complications potentially, or potentially death? Ask them why they think kids are able to do that, but not able to do these other things. The third thing I would mention is aside from chemically castrating these young boys, the puberty blockers, I would talk about some of the stuff in the files that they don't know about. Like these are doctors on the record admitting that giving young girls testosterone is likely leading, in some cases, likely the root cause of these girls developing cancerous tumors in their liver. Talk about people like Yarden who died from complications of this surgery. How are we allowing kids to consent to this kind of experimentation? That's what I hope comes as a result of these files. Is people are able, if you're watching this and you care about this issue, you're able to pull out, I know I kept repeating myself on some things, but I hope these are the points we need to be familiar with and comfortable talking about with people, because they're probably not going to read these files themselves. And if you talk about it in the right way and without anger, as we've said, it's hard not to have anger about this, righteous anger. It's a horrible topic, what's being done to children. But if you're able to talk about it more in a, can you believe this kind of way, without judgment of them for not knowing, without judgment of them for having an awful opinion given to them that they haven't researched, without that kind of contempt. If you can talk about it in a, I just learned this kind of way, can you believe this? That, I think, has success, because then you're inviting them to discover information with you. You're including yourself in having learned this with them. You're not like preaching down at them. You're sort of like, did you read that? Have you read this? That's how I approach those conversations sometimes. Let me see. Therese, this should not be a political issue. Exactly, it should not. I'm going to show you something. Let's see, before I go, if I can find it. So I was if I can find it, I'll pull it up. I'm looking for it right now. The other night I shared a screenshot on Twitter that got reshared a lot. It was from Reddit, because I was on there the day that the news broke about the UK banning puberty blockers for kids. And I looked at there's lots of different trans boards on Reddit, but I was looking to see what people were saying in the trans forum, and they were having a meltdown. And they're just having an absolute meltdown. And if you go into the comments on the posts about it, you can see quickly that none of these people have any idea what's going on. They have no idea whatsoever. They have no idea why the UK did this. They have no idea what's in the WPATH files. They have no idea about the potential dangers of these hormone blockers, the puberty blockers and the hormones and the surgeries. And that's crazy because this is the target community. This is the community that's being experimented on. This is the community that should know everything possible about this, and they are clueless. So they're in there asking questions. Here, I found it. They're in there asking questions about it, like, why did the UK do this? And every single person answering is saying stuff like, because they're transphobes, because they're conservatives, because they're right wingers, because they're transphobic. Like, they don't have any clue why this is happening. Let me make this a little larger. Oh, it's making it smaller for some reason. So they shared, can you guys see this? They shared children no longer to be prescribed puberty blockers. NHS England confirms. This person who shared it 2 days ago in the trans forum, which is a huge forum at Reddit, says effing hell. And then everyone here is just melting down, all caps. Well, no effing wonder my general practitioner is getting hormones so effing annoying for F's sake, all caps. Uh, look at this answer. Well, it's politicians, bigotry, and healthcare combined. Uh, effing horrible. These poor kids. Forced puberty is a terrible thing, they say. Forced puberty. Puberty is a biological function. It's a natural, it's not forced. And you have a gripe with nature. You have a gripe with gravity. You have a gripe with the natural law. You have a gripe with reality. That's who your gripe is with. Some people would say it's with God, but you have a gripe with the natural world, with Mother Nature. Forced puberty. It's like aging. Forced aging is a terrible thing. Help, I'm being oppressed. I'm aging. It's terrible. Like that. That's a function of life. That's like Mother Nature. Oh, it just goes on and on. They're talking about body horror is how they describe puberty. Um, these are more people reacting to the news. Oh, what the F? When does this take place? Immediately, if I understand correctly, it was put through the government months ago. I can make this larger now. I hate it here. I hate it here. I hate it here. I hate it here. People are just freaking out. Thank God I don't live there. F conservatives. They think conservatives did this. They don't understand this was a independent medical review, a systematic review of available evidence by doctors. The government didn't do this. The government commissioned an independent study by the medical community. They think this is political. F conservatives, they say. I'm 16, so I would be screwed. Girl, you may not realize it, but this could have just saved your life. Look at this one. Watching the UK continue to exemplify its national character as a slightly more posh Alabama. Now they're making insults on Alabama. They're trying to frame this. The only way their brain can interpret it in their cult is they can only see things in like black or white, conservative or leftist. They're like, oh, it must be conservatives, like people from Alabama. Is there a reason why the world sucks? Somebody says greed for power, fame, and wealth. So sorry for everyone here. I hope expert makes decisions on these and not politicians who just fearmonger. Did you see this? See, this is what I mean. They don't know anything. This person says, I hope the experts get to make the decisions. That's what just happened, honey. Hopeless Yuma, your name, whatever your name is. Honey, that's what just happened. Read the news articles about it. It's not the politicians. The politicians commissioned an independent study by the medical experts who said there's no evidence that this is safe to be doing to children, so we're going to stop it. Don't worry, though. It's just a pause button. I'm sorry, I couldn't help making that joke. It's just a pause button on this. What about the private clinics? Yeah, now there are some saying that they can still get this through private clinics. They just can't get it covered by NHS, which I think is true, unfortunately. Here's another young person. My life is an actual living hell, and soon when I turn to adult, they'll make it all the while harder to get it even then. What's the actual effing point? LOL. These kids are not learning how to read or write in school, but they're learning that they want to get on these puberty blocking drugs. This person says, well, I'm glad I moved back to Ireland like a year ago. Bad news. Everyone's Catholic. Look at this person. People are saying this isn't a genocide. Still, children are literally being denied basic health care. There's nothing basic. First of all, no, this is not a genocide. A genocide? Do you not know what words mean? Don't use a word like that incorrectly. You steal its meaning, child. And the other thing, children are literally being denied basic health care. No, there's nothing basic about taking off a child's breast or penis or sterilizing them for life. That's not basic healthcare. That's experimental medicine. That's what's being done to children like you. Look at this person. It's totally genocide. It's been steadily getting more transphobic here for years, and they're just not bothering to hide it anymore. Back to the underground unsafe way, says someone. Look at this person. This is how, again, misguided. They don't know anything. They don't know anything except the propaganda in their echo chamber. So this person, presumably a young person, says, serious question. Did J.K. Rowling have any influence on this? Let's blame the Harry Potter lady for the doctors saying, hey, this is medically unsound and let's stop it. Let's blame J.K. Rowling. She certainly did influence millions to hate on a minority for no reason, says someone. I was wondering the same thing, to be honest, says a third. Why does the UK suck? They say, look at this one. So basically they kill children. Honey, no. This so-called gender affirming care has killed children. Yes. Look at this. I'm not trans, but I fully support anyone who feels they are. I fully support blockers until the child is old enough to choose for themselves. Really? Because you're basically saying they're old enough now to choose blockers for themselves. So why are you separating out blockers from hormones and surgery? I guess the nice thing about the US is you can just go to another state to get help. I can't imagine how horrible it must be for your entire country to have this sort of human rights abuse. This is why we have to ban it in every state in the US, by the way. This person's right. You can just take your kid across state lines and have them mutilated and sterilized. It just goes on and on. What's wrong with this country? Oh, my country is a shit hole. I thought you weren't supposed to say that. I thought you told Trump he couldn't say that about countries. Jesus effing Christ, they say. Look at this. If it weren't for Reddit's policies, I would threaten them so effing hard right now. I guess he would be making threats here. I hate the world. It's Turf Island. Britain really, really, really needs some French scale protests, they say. Blood on their misspelled effing hands, every single drop. Don't let them forget that. Well, they're trying to prevent blood on their hands, child. They want us to suffer. They want the suffering to be written into our bodies so we can be walking trophies of their abuse. This is just madness. You need mental health care. Nobody wants you to suffer. Look at this. Everything is upside down. This is the world we're in right now. Up is down, down is up. So this person says the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. The NHS, maybe a little harm. Again, they have no understanding of what's been going on. They have no understanding of the harm that the doctors are aware that they've been causing in children. And so they see it in this upside down way. There's so many more comments. And when I first looked at this, there was one that was really funny that said, it was insulting the intelligence, I guess, of the doctors who did this. And it said, they're so stupid, but they misspelled "their." I can't find that one. I'm gonna stop sharing. But it just made me laugh. I wish I'd screenshot that one. Maybe I'll go back and find it. I there's nothing that makes me giggle more than seeing some random internet person who's obviously not very bright trying to insult the intelligence of someone else and misspelling something. And we all make typos, but when you're doing it in the context of trying to insult someone else's intelligence, it's the funniest freaking thing to me. So like, they're so stupid, and I just wanted to be like asterisk there. You know? But a lot of these are young people, and they just the state of government schools, I mean, they have atrocious spelling, they do run-on sentences, the grammar is horrible, they have a very limited vocabulary, they use a lot of curse words as filler, like, pretty depressing, even if it weren't about the subject, pretty depressing reading the way that some of them write. Dion, these kids have been so confused. It's a crime against humanity. It is. Yeah, you can go and read it, and it's like I actually don't it doesn't whip me up and that much. It doesn't stoke anger in me. It actually stokes kind of I feel sorry for a lot of these young people as they have no clue what's happening and they're just being used. They're being used as foot soldiers for their own destruction. A huge deficit in critical thinking skills, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up. If you guys unless you have any questions, Q&A, I will see you tomorrow. I'm gonna plug again April 27th because I was on, like I said, Lauren Chin's channel yesterday, and she's gonna be one of the speakers and also doing comedy at Minds Fest, where I'm gonna be moderating some panels, and so that was cool to mention that again. If you're in the Austin, Texas area, or you're willing to travel here, Minds Fest is happening on Saturday, April 27th. There's a whole lineup of speakers, panelists who people are going to be debating things. There's going to be comedy. Jimmy Dore's on the list. I'm trying to think who else is coming. A lot of the Timcast guys, Shane Cashman, Ian Crossland, and uh, uh, Destiny. That he's one of the leftists who will actually come and debate things. He's been at a lot of the events I've been at. So regardless what you think about his opinions, at least he shows up to have conversations. You got to give him credit for that. Anyway, that's happening Saturday, April 27th. And you can get more info at minds.com. If you have any questions in the chat, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to be wrapping it up and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Look at this. This is my Nerdrotic mug. Or yeah, there it is. The Friday Night Tights. Got that mug today. Thanks, Davina. Thanks, Dawn. Bye, everyone. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow at 1:00. If you haven't seen it yet and you want an excuse to go to the movies, go see the movie Ordinary Angels, which we reviewed last night on that Christian panel. and go check out the panel and listen. We had special guest Drunk 3 PM. You can hear what we had to say about it. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.